We've got two movies with heads being kept alive in a laboratory. It's time for a double decapitation, double feature review here on Horrendous, films that go bump in your mind. Today we are discussing The Brain That Wouldn't Die from 1962 and The Frozen Dead from 1966. The easy joke here is that these two ladies have lost their heads. That joke is not only lame, but it's also inaccurate. Our two heroines have lost literally everything but their heads, and they still manage to get stuff done. If I lose my phone, my entire life shuts down, so hats off to them. These two films are part of a small subgenre of horror involving severed heads kept alive in the name of science. This includes the likes of Reanimator, The Man Without a Body, and of course the wonderfully titled but badly executed They Saved Hitler's Brain. The Brain That Wouldn't Die, directed by Joseph Green, is a schlock classic released in 1962. The closing credits on some prints have the title The Head That Wouldn't Die, and at one point I Was a Teenage Brain Surgeon was being considered for the title. The movie had actually been completed in 1959, which kind of explains why it feels so much like a 50s movie. Immediately upon release, the movie fell into the public domain because of a failed copyright notice. That meant anyone was free to show it or distribute it. As a result, there have been prints so crappy they look like they've been dropped from orbit. As of this writing, though, there are really nice copies available for free on several streaming services. Jason Evers plays Dr. Bill Kortner, a brilliant surgeon with a god complex and the habit of breaking into the most overwritten speeches you've ever heard. Bill's father, played by Bruce Brighton, loses a patient, but the younger Kortner jumps in, eager to try an experimental procedure.
Make an opening into the chest cavity. Apply 100 milliamps of current directly to the heart, then massage by hand. I'll handle the brain area.
Plus, he's worried he may have dropped an earbud into the incision, so he's eager to open the guy back up again. His process works, reviving the essentially dead patient, but Bill's dad still has to get in the last word.
But it still is too risky, too uncontrolled.
How many people have you brought back from the dead today, good sir? Organ transplantation was in its infancy at the time, so the word transplant must have seemed exotic enough that it should be used repeatedly.
To be able to transplant limbs and organs, I've got to have limbs for my transplant experiment. Complete transplantation.
Bill also likes to play up the fact that he's breaking new ground.
Nothing is unbelievable if you have the nerve to experiment.
You don't conduct experiments on people.
Test an experiment. Test an experiment.
But the one thing that mad scientists are constantly told,
Don't try to play God.
no, he shouldn't play God, and you know why? Morgan Freeman played God and he aced it. There's very little else to be done with the role. Actually, Alanis Morissette played a pretty good God in Kevin Smith's Dogma too. But aside from them, no one should play God. Bill's fiancée Jan, played by Virginia Leith, shows up for this awkward exchange.
Careful, your father's liable to report us.
And stop the floor show. When you two are married, it won't be fun to watch anymore.
Well, I can promise you one thing. Your grandchildren won't be test tube babies.
This is not an in-law friendly conversation. I have no idea where they were going with this.
In a few more weeks, and nothing will keep us apart.
And clearly, she's doomed. There's some concern that Bill is abusing his employee discount privileges.
The superintendent had it out with me. He thinks it's you who's been stealing those limbs from the amputee operations.
But before he can process that, Bill gets an urgent call from his assistant, Kurt.
He called from the country place, and he said something terrible had happened. He wanted you to come right out.
Wow, that sounds ominous. Wasn't that ominous? No one else seems to think it's ominous. Okay, I'll play it cool.
Thank you.
So it's off to the country place. Here's where Bill proves himself to be the worst fiancé ever. He wrecks Jan's car, gets thrown clear and escapes harm. And let's see, was Jan's head maybe loosened in the crash? No, it is off. It's completely off. I'm going to try a little Gorilla Glue, but I'm not feeling optimistic about this. Man, she must have had a hell of a chocolate addiction. The instant her head comes off, Hershey's syrup goes everywhere. You know, there's a lot at stake here, but I really want to flip that statue back and look for the controls to open the Batcave. Bill clearly doesn't have a Frankenstein-level budget, so this is a more DIY country home lab. No strict fad machines here, just a simpler approach where man can commit crimes against nature in what is essentially his home office. Like any good mad scientist, Bill bullies his disfigured lab assistant into helping him with an ill-advised procedure.
You got that? Kurt, please. Sterilize the tubes and instruments quickly.
A quick montage later and voila! Jan's head is being kept on life support, and Bill has 50 hours to find the perfect body onto which he will staple the head of his beloved. And as creepy as all that sounds, the movie switches to a different brand of creepy during Bill's excursions to nightclubs, beauty pageants, and private modeling sessions, looking for the perfect woman to decapitate in the name of love. Jan and Kurt get on each other's nerves immediately. It's like a workplace comedy gone horribly, horribly wrong.
What are you talking about? You're nothing but a freak of life. And a freak of death.
Jan's also developing a psychic rapport with Bill's failed experiment in the closet.
You. Behind that door.
And she mysteriously becomes a mannequin head when viewed from a distance. At some point in the film, we see that Bill stores his liquor in the laboratory. Now, we all know what a bad idea drinking and driving is. I have to imagine drinking and transplanting human parts is at least frowned upon. Even more interesting is that the Satan juice is stored right outside the locked room that contains the monstrosity that is the sum of Bill's scientific failures. So does this mean every time he sneaks a peek at the monster in the closet, he immediately is driven to drink? It gives one pause. Our hero Jan, of course, went on to a lucrative career in infomercials.
Well, the total decapitation diet does get results, but it's not for everyone.
And apparently she's found her soulmate in this guy. The Brain That Wouldn't Die is a magnificently awful movie, and I mean that in the best way possible.
Like all quantities, horror has its ultimate, and I'm that.
There is a horror beyond yours, and it's in there.
The cast is reasonably talented, but the dialogue is so over the top and it's surprisingly sleazy for its era. It's an amazing watch. I recommend. 1966's The Frozen Dead takes place in England, where German scientist Dr. Norberg, played by Dane Andrews, has set up shop in an old mansion. Back during World War II, Norberg developed a system for freezing people alive, and he used that process in a bunch of Hitler's bigwigs so the Third Reich might rise anew one day in the future. Now, freezing is one thing, but thawing out is another matter entirely. The few subjects Norberg has managed to revive are all freezer burned, worse than those pizza rolls I got 2 Super Bowls ago. As a result, these Nazi corpsicles are drilling idiots. Norberg hasn't been able to perfect the thawing process in 20 years, but now the deadline has been moved up because General Lubeck, the project's financier, suddenly needs his soldiers ready to take over the world by next Tuesday, preferably before lunch. To complicate matters, Norberg's niece Jean, played by Anna Polk, arrives home from college a week early with her friend Elsa, played by Kathleen Breck. Elsa, the Frozen Dead? I know, I should let it go. Elsa immediately gets a bad feeling about the place, and the brain-damaged Gestapo butler isn't helping. Jean knows nothing of her uncle's work, so Norberg must keep her from learning that there are Bird's Eye brand frozen Nazis in the basement. Norberg decides he needs a brain. A living human brain. Once he has one, he's going to teach it to control the severed arms he's got hanging on the wall, and that will tell him how to defrost Nazis without frying their brains. No, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. Norberg also enlists the aid of brilliant young American Dr. Ted Roberts, played by Philip Gilbert, though Roberts can never learn of the true purpose of the experiment. Additionally, Roberts' innate hunkiness catches Jean's eye. Norberg's assistant Carl gets the ball rolling on the brain acquisition project, killing Elsa and blaming it on one of the doc's failed experiments. Carl may be evil, but damn, he's showing some initiative. Norberg is horrified by the girl's death, but as any scientist worth his degree from Miskatonic University will tell you, you can't waste a perfectly good brain. So, despite Elsa's tragic demise, Norberg lops off her head and hooks her up like an Amazon Echo. Scientific discovery awaits. Jean is told that Elsa has left in the night, but our plucky heroine ain't buying it and starts an investigation that does not sit well with General Lubeck or his slithery sidekick, Dr. Turpitz. And Elsa's new condition apparently allows her to send telepathic warnings to her old friend and start a general unrest amongst the corpsicles. Every time the box containing Elsa's lopped-off noggin opens, the movie's organ player really earns his keep. The movie is very much in the Frankenstein tradition, with the acquisition of human brains and the actions of incompetent assistants driving the plot. And the influence of the Hammer films of the period is particularly apparent. One can easily picture Hammer regular Peter Cushing stepping into any one of several roles. The Frozen Dead is, in fact, the first horror movie I remember seeing. I caught it on a Saturday afternoon back in the day, and it really left an impression on me. It still holds up in a lot of ways, and Elsa's disembodied head remains a showstopper. particularly when we see this lovely actress turn into this nightmare machine. The movie drags a bit in the middle, particularly during Jean's investigation into whether or not Elsa got on the outbound train that morning. But the climax is cheesy good fun, and Elsa's final lines are downright haunting.
What? Bury me. Bury me.
Dr. Norberg is played by Dana Andrews, who I remember best from 1957's Curse of the Demon. Norberg is probably the most low-key mad scientist in horror film history. There were no histrionics about the importance of his work or how he's doing this all for the betterment of the world, just the occasional tantrum. He's not a mad scientist, just a cranky one. So there we have it, 2 separate scientific experiments that bring humanity one step closer to the dream of sentient bowling balls. I think these two pair together nicely. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or if you think I'm just talking out of the rotted hole where my nose used to be. I make it a point to respond to comments whenever possible. And if you by some chance enjoyed my rambling, a like and or subscribe would be awesome. See you next time.